All right, should we start this?
I feel like we already have.
We did. It's happening. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Away Games, the Chicago Cubs podcast. I'm Kevin McCaffrey. I'm here with the Cyclone, Adam Mamawala.
That's me. How's it going, everybody?
Yeah, we're talking right, but I'm doing this episode very hungover. Did stand up for the first time in New York in like 13 months. So we were talking about drunk stories. Adam's not a drunk, I would say.
I'm not.
Yes.
Have you ever seen me drunk? Have I ever been drunk in your presence?
You've definitely been buzzed, but I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
Also, like me, like I'm given pretty hard leeway before I'm like, that guy's drunk, because I am. But I do. I mean, I've definitely noticed that. I've definitely seen you buzzed, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen you
probably during a Cubs game or
yeah, during watching a Cubs game, probably together. But yeah, I've never seen you like I don't think I've ever seen you like sloppy, you know.
Yeah. Well, as those of you know who have been listening to the podcast for some time, and thank you if you have, follow us at Away Games Pod on Twitter and Instagram. I used to be a real LaCroix boy when I would come over to your apartment and record the pod. So
yeah,
not too bad there. And this was long before we were doing a podcast, but one of the drunkest nights I can remember that I was with you, but I don't think I fully got out of control until you had gone home, was the night that the Cubs, I think you joined us during the game because you were coming back from a show, but Ken and I were watching the Game 4 of the 2015 DS when the Cubs beat the Cardinals. And I was going to Boston the next morning. I had a bus at like 9 a.m. And I wouldn't say I blacked out, but I browned out. Yeah. And I woke up, and it was one of those like moments where I'm panicking, like, oh shit, like I have to and I wake up and I look around and my bag is perfectly packed. And I'm like, am I a better person when I'm hammered? Like, how did I do something productive that I don't even remember?
Oh man, first of all, talk about that Cardinals game. Great time to say happy career Hector Rondon, who just retired.
I didn't even hear that.
Retired.
Happy trails, Hector.
Yes, happy trails, Hector. 33 years old, retired. Enjoy that money, baby. But that game, that strikeout is just an all-time Cub memory of that game. And you blacking out and getting things done. It's actually a joke on my album, Nice and Drunk, where I talk about how that doesn't happen. Like you never black out and wake up to find that you did something productive.
I'm the anomaly, I guess. Yep,
yes,
I'm the one person.
You canceled my bid. Good for you.
Like I paid my taxes.
Yeah, I did. I mean, this is basically the joke, but these are things you actually do. Good for you.
That's very funny.
Hey, it seems like the Cubs are drunk. How about that transition lately?
Well, you know, Kevin, I don't know if you saw this, but about 10 minutes before we started recording, I put up a little poll on Twitter, and we only have a few results. But I gave 3 options. I said, we're recording this week's podcast in 10 minutes. What should we talk about? Option number 1, the 4-game winning streak. Option number 2, the 4-game losing streak. Option number 3, only Fernando Tatis Jr. And so far, Tatis is winning by a lot. So
really, okay.
We got to listen to the fans here. And it looks like we're only talking about Tatis pimping that move around third base was a thing of beauty, and I'm a big fan of it. We should talk about that later. The Cubs are wildly inconsistent. I'm very confused. What are the Cubs? What's happening?
Yeah, no, but let's Tatis first for a minute. Let's do the vote some justice. We're sorry, Cespedes Family Barbecue stepping on your talking about Fernando Tatis all the time thing, but he's fun to talk about. He leads
who doesn't want to talk about him? Come on,
leads the league in errors and homers, I think. So it's exciting chaos no matter how the ball is finding him. What's the pimp around third you're talking about? Because he had several pimps this week.
I'm thinking of the one where he kind of stopped and then backed up and then started going again, like the kind of it was almost like a little crip walk sort of move where he did like a little foxtrot and then kept moving.
Okay, that's pretty good.
Which one are you thinking about?
Well, as a man of spite, I enjoyed his covering up the eye after he homered on Trevor Bauer, because Bauer famously said, yeah, I was pitching with one eye closed and really just, he's fucking galaxy braining all the time, that guy. So he was pitching with one eye closed in the spring training at some point. And I think everyone universally just in baseball, I think, was like, okay, this is a jerk off thing to say and a thing to do. So Fernando covered up his eye after hitting a bomb off him. And then on his next homer, he did Trevor Bauer's weird little strikeout strut, just a little like booty shake. So he had separate bits for each time he was going to homer off of Trevor Bauer. I just want to know how many more there are. If he hits a fourth homer in a game off him, he's just gonna carry around Rachel Luba on his shoulders, I guess, doing that Trevor thing. I'm sure she'd be down for it with some camera time.
I mean, not since the like Pedro, the Yankees are my daddy thing has there really been this kind like this is awesome, and especially following like we don't get to see a lot of West Coast baseball when
Right.
you live on the East Coast, and I imagine for people in Chicago, it's like kind of the same. The games are on very late, and this is going to be really really fun, and I think that at some point the Padres are going to have their 2015 Cubs moment where they beat the Dodgers in the playoffs, and it's going to be. Can you imagine how chippy a playoff series would be between these teams?
Yeah, it's already pretty intense. And meanwhile, by the way, I think the Giants are in second. No one's talking about the Giants, but in that division, they are, or if they aren't, they're very close to it. The Giants have been playing good baseball too. Just no one's talking about him. Farhan Zaidi is a smart baseball man in charge of that team too.
Yeah.
So the West is like suddenly pretty interesting. San Francisco's tied for first as we record this with LA. And no one's talking about it. And weirdly, Arizona's tied with San Diego. So all this, like San Diego,
there's a lot of weirdness. The Red Sox are good for some reason. Like there's a lot of weird things early on, I feel like.
Yes, and the Cubs are in last as we speak. Right now, in last in probably the worst division in baseball. I would say you could make an argument for the AL Central, I suppose.
Yeah, I would go out on a limb and say that if we are starting our Cubs podcast by talking not about the Cubs, that's not a great sign.
It's not going great. So as we're recording this on Wednesday during the day, the Cubs are on a four-game losing streak. Correct.
Yep. Best way to follow up a 4-game winning streak.
Absolutely. And it just seems like that's how it's going to go. Jason Heyward said that they feel fortunate not to be 10 games out, which, yeah, I guess that's a thing. It's just, I don't know. I think you look at the Cubs record right now, they're 10-13. I don't think they're that bad, probably, overall.
I don't think they're that good, though.
Yeah, either. I also don't think they're that good. I think you're looking at this roster and how many guys are on one-year deals. I think it's very clear to see what we thought was the philosophy coming into this year, which is get a bunch of guys on one-year deals, and then this is the year where you deal them all out at the deadline.
Yeah.
But that only works if anyone wants those guys, and there's not. I mean, one of the guys on a one-year deal, Chris Bryant, is second in the National League in WAR right now. He's playing great. His bicep is apparently hurting, acting up a little bit. But, you can see the reasoning behind getting all these guys on one-year deals, thinking you can get them to play up and flip them at the deadline, sort of restock, reload going into next year and forward. I understand that. But they're not really playing well enough to be flipped,
Right. Well, that's kind of the catch-22, right? If they were all playing well enough to get something in return, maybe you'd be in it enough to not want to trade them. And if they're not, It's like, well, what's the point?
Yeah, I think so. And I think Jed was probably going into this I think one of the predictions I made before the year was that the Cubs would sell from first place, and that seems optimistic at this point, the first place part at least, because I think Milwaukee's better than we realized. When you have two basically unbeatable aces and you have two extremely good high leverage relievers, it really makes games short, and you don't even need that much offense to win.
Right.
So I am feeling like Milwaukee's the favorite in this division right now. And unfortunately, David Stearns, who is basically the man running that organization, is a very smart baseball guy. So that's unfortunate.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I'm kind of jumping all over the place, but last week there were signs of encouragement, and it's not like the Cubs won every single game, but you had a 1-week stretch in which the Cubs scored 13 or more runs in 3 games, which is, I am not the Elias Sports Bureau, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say that's not something that's happened a lot, even in 2016 probably.
Right.
So you have to feel good about that. But then the Cubs did the most Cubs thing possible, which was like you win 15-2, and then you immediately lose a close, low-scoring game by 1 run, which has like been a hallmark of this team for as long as you or I have been following them. Like it almost was like a running joke at a certain point. Like, okay, they're going to score double-digit runs and then get shut out the next day. And just looking at like the 4-game stretch from Friday to Monday, you've got a game where they scored 15, and even Monday where they lost 8-7, and then you have a couple games where they get shut out. So sometimes you're running into good pitching, but it's like I just don't know what this team is, and betting on baseball is always a bad endeavor. But like, I would not bet on this team because you just do not know what you're getting from them any given night.
No, if you're going to bet, you should prop bet probably through Thrive Fantasy, and you should use the promo code Away Games to get a free $20 deposit with the
Right.
$20 you put in. So bet on props. That's what we're saying. But yes, betting on the team right now, it's hard to predict where they're going. And one bright spot, let's say, just among the pitching, as I'm looking at the pitching stats here, Jake Arrieta is sitting here with a 150 ERA plus. He's 50% better than the league average. He's been great.
Is he going to get traded too?
I mean, that's the thing is I feel like if you were a contender, I mean, if this was the trade deadline and you were a contender looking at the Cubs, who would you want? I mean, I think if you needed a starter right now, yeah, you would be interested in Jake Arrieta.
You want Jake? You probably want Trevor Williams. You definitely want Kimbrel. You might want Bryant. You definitely don't want Zach Davies. I don't want him. Come on the pod anytime, but
yes,
sorry, man. It's not been good.
No, Zach Davies has had a really rough go. He's had the roughest go of his career so far, and he's not old. His stuff, and it's not like his velocity fell off a cliff. He's never been a high velocity guy, but he's still sitting 88, 89. So it's sort of mysterious how poorly he's doing right now. But yeah, I mean, it's just like, I think I feel like some people feel like Cubs Twitter is crazy negative, and sometimes there are people who are, for sure. But remember a couple weeks ago when there was a lot of Cubs Twitter talking about extend Zach Davies? Sometimes it's weirdly positive too. I mean, he had like one really good start, the beginnings of another, I guess, and that's been it. Yeah. So I mean, like, I think.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, like, you want Jake Arrieta in a playoff rotation. Like, even if he were not pitching as well as he's pitching, he's somebody that you would trust in a big spot. So I think there will be interest for him, especially if he continues pitching well.
I think so too. And there's a mutual option that the Cubs and Jake Arrieta have for next year if they do hang on to him till the end of the year. I think it's for about $10 million. Mutual option meaning both Jake and the team would have to give it a thumbs up. So the chances that both of them would think that's exactly the right value are pretty low. But I do think there is something to how good Jake looks right now, how well he's pitching. And it's not smoke and mirrors. The stuff it's not 95, 96, 97 on the fastball like it used to be, but he's still hitting 92 and 93, and it's moving. Everything is darting left and right. The breaking ball looks great. It just looks like uncomfortable at bats for people. And it seems like Jake knew that he believed in the pitching infrastructure and philosophy here in Chicago, and there was value in him getting back there. And that gives me hope that there's a chance that both he and the team could find value in staying together beyond this year, one way or another.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, we talked last week. I think I said, like, I don't know if there's anybody I'd rather have on the mound in like a first and third nobody out situation than Jake Arrieta. And then we saw it a couple days ago where, like, he's already given up a run, the bases are loaded with nobody out, and he works his way out of it with the same poise that we've seen from him so many times. And it's really impressive. Also, mutual options are a lot of fun. Didn't you ever wish like relationships worked that way? Just like, all right, we're at the end of the calendar year. Like, let's have a discussion about it. Do we both want to do this? Does one of us want to do this? And then if one person does want to do it, maybe you get like a compensatory friend. They set you up with somebody they know, like a Rule 5 date.
Yeah, a rule 5 friend pick is pretty good. Also, I feel like relationship wise, you'd almost want instead of a pick, like a veto. You'd almost want like one of their friends. You could be like, okay, we'll stay together, but we are not hanging out with Susan anymore. That's it. She's out. If we are going to continue. And speaking of Wilson, he's been good. I'm looking at this list here, and I'm trying to see things that have been good during this bad run.
I mean, that home run he hit Monday was approximately 800 feet.
Yes, he hammered that ball, and Wilson is just, he's looking exactly like what we thought he was, which is a top 2 catcher in Major League Baseball. He's hitting the ball extremely well. He's playing good defense. I think he had a little dip in framing after the beginning of the year, but I think that's come back up a little bit. And the man's just having to play all the time because the Cubs, other Cubs have not been performing, and just with injuries as well too. Once Javi started to make a little more contact and play a little bit more of a normal Javi profile as opposed to like the insane extreme no contact or homer thing. So I mean, I think it's just like Wilson's been having to play so much too. So I hope he gets a little bit of a break here at some point. But
yeah. Well, what else? I mean, what else? If there's anything, are you encouraged by at this point?
Well, one thing that was really fun this week was the debut of Big Trevor Megill. And if you didn't see it, Megill is listed at 6'8", 250. And that could be a boy. It's a big boy. Could be a little, and I'm not sure that's giving him credit for all his inches and pounds. Really, too. I'm not sure that's a fully accurate thing. He's 27 years old. He came in and made his, I believe, regular season major league debut this week against the Braves. And when he did, his stuff looked nuts. He struck out a dude at 99 miles an hour as the hardest pitch thrown by a Cub this season. And he had a cutter slider thing that looked crazy too. And this is just like to give you guys a little backstory on Trevor Megill, he was a Rule 5 guy who the Cubs then made a deal to be able to keep without keeping him. They made a trade, so they ended up getting to keep him without having him on the major league roster. But Megill is one of the many big boy relievers that the Cubs have picked out of the San Diego Padres system, much like Rowan Wick and very big boy Brad Wick. But he's 27 years old. He's on the league minimum right now, obviously, because he just made his debut, and he's under control for a while. And Trevor Megill could be very exciting stuff out of that bullpen.
Yeah, I mean, between seeing him, between seeing Steele come up, like the Cubs do have some really exciting pieces in the bullpen. Maples is still going to Maples, and
he's been good.
We saw it again. Yeah, he has been good. I mean, we saw some of the issues with, I think there's a bases loaded walk in there, and some of the things that we've seen be problematic for him before. But how are you feeling about him thus far?
I'm feeling great about Dylan Maples, and I think just as far as Cubs fandom, Cubs Twitter world, I feel like there is more negativity than there should be about a number of guys in this bullpen, and the bullpen walks too many people overall, which is, I mean, that sucks, and God, that is frustrating to watch. But if we're complaining about people, Dylan Maples, I don't think is a guy to complain too much about right now. We know his profile. He made genuine mechanical changes. I mean, just look at video of him pitching from any previous year and this year, and the seemingly shorter arm movement seems to be a significant change, and that's made him a high walk guy, but playable in a way that he just wasn't before. I'm looking at his stats right now. 193 ERA. Obviously, that is good. Now, he's walked a bunch of guys. He's basically walking a man an inning, which is not good, but he's striking out 15 per 9. So it's playable right now as one of your bullpen guys, and I think it's trending in the right direction. So I feel good about that. But also, like, while people are, I think I saw a lot of people freaking out about Jason Adam, who obviously had an absolute nightmare inning. That was terrible. And I think it makes sense to use with one of the guys who has an option to option him down, as the Cubs did at this moment. But Jason Adams been very good for the bulk of his time in Chicago. Like, that's just a fact. He had one very bad game. Also, weird Dan Winkler had one terrible game in Pittsburgh. Awful. Craig Kimbrell saved his ass. Otherwise, Dan Winkler has been really good. His FIP is at 3.65. The ERA is at 1.04. And it's like the strikeout walk numbers are a little weird, but he's a weird pitcher.
Well, and it's a weird thing because I think people look at pitchers and hitters very differently. And because of the fact that you're not going to see a pitcher every day, especially, relief or starting pitcher, like, their bad outings really stick out in a way that if a hitting prospect comes up and they're 0 for 5 with 4 strikeouts, it's discouraging, but there's usually not this overreaction of like, let's send them down immediately. People look at it as like, yeah, it's a game, like, he'll play tomorrow. Mm-hmm. Pitchers are allowed to have a bad day. We're not gonna always see like 2020 Devin Williams where they just never make a mistake. Like that's not
Yes.
realistic.
I think that's a really good point. Yeah, like Nico Hoerner also on the positive side has looked great so far since coming back up, right? And Wilson Contreras shouted him out too and was like, that guy needs to be in the lineup every day, which you
Yeah.
don't often see other teammates being that forthright. But Wilson, as we know, is he's not holding back anything good or bad at any time. He's telling you how he feels. But I think you make a great point, the difference between the perception of position players and pitchers, because Nico was awful offensively last year, an unplayable offensive major league player, and yet the fandom wanted him in the lineup immediately, no doubt, every day, and it's worked out so far. But we see pitchers have one bad day, and Twitter is just like, oh, this pitcher again, he's trash. A lot of these guys aren't trash. Like, it's just a fact that sometimes you have a bad day. And I do think a pitcher having a bad day it just stands out more because you see less of it.
Yeah, exactly. And also, like, the numbers are so inflated. Like, one bad outing for a relief pitcher, it's going to take like months of good pitching to work their way back to a reasonable number.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think those numbers can be a bit deceiving too. And we see a guy like Adbara Alzolay, who, has sort of he's gotten almost to the end of these starts, and then his inherited runners keep ending up scoring. So the numbers that Alzolay has, they're legitimate. That's how the scoring works, but he's just a hair from looking even so much better on the stat line than he has. And, building him up slowly and having a quick hook is going to be part of the philosophy with Alzolay this year, who just hasn't ever thrown that many innings in a year. But I guess that's another encouraging thing.
Yeah, and that's just kind of bad luck. I think that's a good point about the inherited runners, because like it still shows up the same way in that person's ERA, but it's almost like the pitcher equivalent of BABIP, where like at a certain point it is kind of out of your control. Like you're doing most of the right things, but for and obviously it's a little different because you're creating a mess that somebody then has to get out of.
Right.
But usually, half of those runs are not going to score. Like it's a little just unfortunate, I think.
Yeah, he's basically left two games where lefties let him down, where Chafin came in and got absolutely smoked immediately. So all of his runs scored in Milwaukee. And then this week, Rex Brothers came in and couldn't do anything. And that was after Rex Brothers had been really good 5 times in a row, too. This is another thing where, obviously he was unplayable and terrible in that game, but he was really good 5 times in a row before that, had a good game yesterday. So
it's just got to be unfortunate to have that last name where, like, anytime you have a bad outing, there's just some shitty newspaper waiting for the headline. Oh, brothers.
Oh, brothers. Over and over.
Like whatever the Chicago equivalent of the New York Post is, I could see that being like a story.
Yeah. And you know what? I not that the Chicago newspapers are particularly good, but shout out Chicago for not having a New York Post. I think we don't have an equivalent of the absolute trash fire that is the New York Post. So good job, Chicago.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, like, hitter wise, I think there's a real bummer right now. Bote, Happ, and Heyward. It's 3 different situations, but they're all guys whose peripherals look decent in terms of exit velocity, hard hit balls, etc. But the results are bad. They just are bad to this point. And the peripheral stuff can be useful for predictive and seeing like, how the guy should be doing. But at some point, should doesn't count, Like at some point, it's what you are doing. And I feel like we're approaching that point in the season for these guys.
Yeah, Bote, I forget what night it was, but he hit a ball to center field that I don't know what it was off the bat, but it was absolutely like smoked to center field. And
I thought that was maybe out.
Yeah. So it is frustrating. And they talked about it a little bit on the compound this week, but Bote also laid down maybe the most impressive sacrifice bunt I've ever seen. I don't know how you stay in against a ball cutting into your face at 98 miles an hour and lay down a bunt. So shout out to David Bote for bunting.
Yeah, I remain a Bote stan, just a guy who can hit the ball harder than most people on earth can. And it's weird because he doesn't look like some big jack dude. The man can just really swing a bat hard. but it's like, yeah, I just really, for his sake, want to see some of these balls start falling a little bit more. And with Nico coming up, and Nico's sort of the other thing where his exit velocity numbers aren't as crazy, but they're all landing right now, and that's great.
Right.
And this is and putting the bat on the ball is a skill. And Nico's just been so fun to watch, and it's been interesting to see Nico. I feel like we're seeing a less smiley Nico. I feel like Nico was a very happy seeming guy when he came up at first, a kid playing a game, and now Jack Nico is pissed off that he wasn't on the team to start the year, and I'm fine with that, Nico, too.
Yeah. It's I'm fine with Nico either way. I'm a big Nico guy. And I mean his contact skills are like elite is really the only way to describe it. Like his bat on ball skills are like Fletcher-esque.
Yes, yeah, that's a good comp. David Fletcher over there in Anaheim. And
maybe he knows where your brother's cell phone is.
Yeah, yeah. Who knows? I don't know when we'll start what we had recording, but yes, my brother's cell phone was.
I will call back something that we edited out. I don't care.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. My brother's cell phone was stolen by a stripper in Las Vegas on my bachelor party, and I woke up the next day to him tracking it on his iPad, and he was like, "A stripper has my cell phone in Anaheim right now." So fun stuff. Ian Happ also, man, it's looking rough right now. That is another one where personally for the guy, I would like to see some of this turning around for him soon, because it is ever since, I mean, really dating back to last year and when he had the ball off the eye. I don't know that that's necessarily the problem, but it has not looked good since then.
Yeah, I mean, what are you seeing anything that is particularly troublesome to you as far as Happ is concerned?
I mean, I think it's just he's taking his walks, which is good because that is a major skill of his, and that I think when he's taking the walks, that tells you he's not sort of doing what Javi was doing in the depths of his slump, which is just like expanding the zone, reaching, panicking, and guessing on balls as much. So that's good. That tells you I think that the process is still decent there. But a few years ago, before Ian Happ was sent back down to the minors, we talked about that he had a quirk that he had was he made less contact in the zone than anyone in baseball at that time. He has now been dethroned by Javi, but he has that problem where sometimes it just looks like there is a big hole in that swing. So, I mean, it's just contact stuff with Happ, which is going to be there. That's part of his profile, but he needs to be making a little bit more of it to be productive.
Yeah. How do you feel about him defensively? Because I feel like that was always a thing that people talked about. And now I feel like most of those problems have been fixed.
I've not seen one problem defensively from Ian Happ this year. I mean, he's never going to be Billy Hamilton in center, but I think he's to the eye test, it seems like he's getting to everything that he can get to. You know what I mean? So I think I think this is an average to maybe even slightly above average defensive center fielder. And when his bat is right, I mean, he can have a sort of Dexter Fowler-ish profile, in terms of good enough defensively in center and offensively bringing that high on base switch hitting at the top of the lineup. So I still really like what he's bringing there, and he hasn't let the offensive struggles affect his defense. And he's been shifted around a little bit. We're seeing him play in left a little bit when Jake Marisnick comes in sometimes. And yeah, I think defensively, no problems. We just would love to see that bat come around a little bit.
Right. And that's a good transition. I mean, speaking of Jake Marisnick, one thing that's been kind of interesting to me is that, like, I feel like I've seen contributions from guys who I really thought would, like, not do very much this year, which is nice. So, like, a guy like Jake Marisnick or Duffy or Sogard, I guess, to a lesser extent. But, like, I will give the Cubs and Hoyer credit for, like, adding some pieces that I think have been pretty productive thus far.
Yeah, I think the moves around the margins, the moves that are kind of extra pieces or further down the bench pieces on a real winner, they've had some success with this year. Like you say, I think,
Yeah.
and Marisnik, I think, is such a good example of what this team should be doing and what they should have been doing in years before, because you look at Marisnik's profile and it's basically, and I was very happy to see Almora come back and get a nice ovation, and I always liked Albert Almora. But he's basically, what if Almora was better? Like, that's his profile, right? He's like bigger, he's bigger, hits the ball harder, faster, probably a little better defensive.
Better hair.
You have to give him that. So it's just like, in terms of your defensive center fielder off the bench, it's an upgrade on that. It's a guy who can steal a base in a way that Albert couldn't. It's a guy who, you know, is just faster, so he gives you more that way. He hits the ball harder, and he is a bit more of a platoon split, so he helps you against lefties in a way that Albert wasn't as much. So yeah, that's been really good. And Duffy bringing contact to the lineup, playing various positions around the infield. That's a nice, that's a nice bench guy. But the problem is, it's like, when people are like, why don't they build the whole plane out of the black box thing? It's like, the problem is so much of this team is built out of nice bench guys. Like, there's just a lineup full of nice bench guys when any of the stars go down.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah. So, it was really nice there for a minute. The Cubs were nearly in first. If they had beaten the Brewers last Saturday, they would be in first. They've dropped after dropping 4 games in a row. They're down to last in the in the division right now. And I think it's just going to swing back and forth like that. But it just feels like, this is probably a 500 team.
It probably is. And I mean, that's the point, is that, like, you can't get too high, you can't get too low, because a 500 team is going to get to 500 in an unconventional way sometimes. They might win 4 and then lose 4. And as much as we love these guys and love this team, you don't want to get caught up in seeing them win 4 in a row and being like, oh, look, it's 2016 again, this team is amazing, because that's just not reality. And I think as fans, I can't speak for you, but what I'm looking for is just like a longer stretch of consistency. Like whether that means, I don't know how many games they have in May. Let's say they have 25 games. If in May they're 15-10, okay. Like that is a team doing something good over a period of time. And maybe they get there in a weird way, but like, we need to see some stretches where they are an above 500 team, at least by a few games, to believe that they're anything other than what they look like right now.
Yeah, and we just need to see stretches where the offense is producing runs on a nightly basis, like at all, as opposed to just being absolutely shut down. I mean, if you had told us at this point that the Cubs and the Yankees would have the same record, we'd be pretty excited. But that it is true, but it is a bummer. And I will say, if you think Cubs Twitter is mean, check out Yankees Twitter. They hate everybody, man. they just hate everybody on the team. I think Judge gets a pass with them, and that's it, basically. But it's Minnesota, for Christ's sake, is 7-15. Minnesota is terrible right now. So I think this is just me trying to talk ourselves into, like, it's not as bad as it feels. Like, it's not great, but Minnesota is a really good roster that was expected to basically be there with the White Sox at the top of that division. They're 7-15. That's the worst record in baseball right now. Washington's 8-12. The Yankees are sitting there at 10-13. So yeah.
The NL East is looking like what we thought the Central would be, which is like a bunch of 500 teams, which I guess makes sense because maybe they're beating each other up. But and you also have the kind of opposite of the Twins, which is the Oakland A's, who started out, I believe, 0-6, and then damn near moneyballed their way into a 20-game winning streak.
Yeah,
so it's been weird.
15-9. They won something like 13 in a row. So I think
they won. Like it was broken eventually, but they did win 13 in a row, which is got to be one of the longer streaks probably since that crazy formerly Indians, now Cleveland baseball team streaks in 2017.
Yeah. So other news and notes, we've got, as we said, Hector Rondon retired. Favorite Rondon memories? We said one, right? Basically that ending that series against the Cardinals was awesome.
Yeah, that one's up there. What else sticks out? I mean, he closed a lot of big games for the Cubs. I'm trying to think if he was on the mound for one of my favorite in-person moments, which was the David Ross back pick in Washington.
Ooh,
I don't remember if it was Rondon or Strop. In that game, I do remember whoever it was not pitching that well, so it's probably not a great Rondon memory if it was him.
sure.
Because it was like runners on first and second, and it seemed like the game was getting away, and then Ross back picked. God, such an obscure player's name, and it's not coming to me
I
right now.
believe, isn't it current Cubs spring training legend Jose Lobaton?
No, that was the one in the playoff game where he came off the
yes.
bag.
Oh, yes, that's right. That
The back pick was somebody else who's very obscure.
right. Oh, that's a good deep cut. I love and our friend of the show Ken Schultz, I believe, was talking about this on Twitter. The game against the Giants at Wrigley, where he loaded the bases and then struck out everybody to end the game. Just an absolute tight wire act that felt like, as a Cubs fan, I felt like I'd never seen a Cubs closer get out of that sort of jam. It's, where he loaded the bases up and then struck out everybody and just went nuts coming off that mound at Wrigley against the Giants was an incredible game. And Hector Rondon is a guy, I think his story is an interesting one to look at in terms of where the Cubs are now in a, in a peaks and valleys of winning sort of situation, because Hector Rondon was a Rule 5 draft pick that the Cubs made when they could take a gamble. They got him from Cleveland, and they were not in a position to really go for the playoffs in the season they got him, but they could roster him, and then they kept him, and then he was an extremely effective closer for them for several years and an important part of that championship bullpen. And we're seeing the Cubs sort of, as we said before, with Trevor Megill is one of these kinds of guys, like a big velocity, big stuff guy that the Cubs are maybe able to find a place for now, that if they were true contenders in this moment, maybe wouldn't be getting as much of a look quite yet.
That's a good point.
Yeah. So Hector Rondon, good stuff, buddy. 97 saves.
Yeah, I mean that's not nothing. That's pretty impressive. I've contacted our friends at Elias Sports Bureau, and David Ross, I believe it was Rondon on the mound, and he picked off your boy Clint Robinson.
Clint Robinson. Oh, yes.
And man, if you're Clint Robinson, you really can't get back picked to end a game. Not a good look.
That's a bummer, man. Yeah, that is a,
that's a Colton Wong in the World Series. Like, fuck me.
Yes, just real, if it was a video game, you would unplug it. You would be like, that can't happen. I'm resetting the game. That didn't count. So Hector Rondon, great. I think, him and Strop being the 8th and 9th inning for a while there, those are two guys who are probably both. I think Strop is maybe finally getting the credit for how good of an all-time reliever he has been for the Cubs, but two guys that are probably a little underappreciated for what their contributions were.
I would agree, and that moment striking out, who was it on the Cardinals who he struck out to end the game? Do you remember? I don't even recall who it was.
Yeah, not off the top of my.
But I mean, I just one of those times where like I can picture that pitch and I can picture his reaction. And I would describe it as it is in the archive of like GIFs in my head. You know what I mean? Like I have a lot of those of the Cubs. Like I can like vividly picture like what Justin Grimm looked like after that double play, or obviously like the ball going into Rizzo's glove. All these things from the past 5-6 years, and that Rondon strikeout and like his reaction after it is something that will always be seared into my brain. And I'm a big fan.
Yeah, totally. Any other notes you've got down to address this week?
I do not. I looking ahead as we always do. We've got 2 more against the Braves, which I mean, listen, the Braves are or should be a good team, but they're also like they're playing without some of their best pitchers. Like it would be nice to not get swept in a 4-game series by the Braves.
Yeah.
And then we're looking at 3 at Cincinnati, and then it does not get easier because the Cubs play the Dodgers at Wrigley Field starting on Monday. So good luck with that.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting week. Also, I just want to say I still like Richard Williams. I enjoy Trevor Williams' dad. I think putting him on TV, I saw some people being like, oh, enough of this. Man, it's a fucking nice story. That's my angle. That's the last thing I've written down. Trevor Williams' dad, it's a nice story. If there's a dad who grew up as a Cubs fan, worked at Wrigley Field, and whose kid is pitching pretty well, I think it's fine to talk about this guy, to reference him during the game. It's a long game. I'm not tired of it yet. I like Richard Williams. I'll say that.
I'm totally on board. And it's not like he's like in the booth for the entire, like, it's a story that they refer back to. And like, yeah, give me Richard Williams instead of Mark Grace talking about his ex-wife. Like, we don't need that.
Yes. So I'm fine. I'm fine with that. And not coming for, and there are certain things that, I do get tired of, whatever. I'm not going straight morale, self-branding, like, one direction. Everything is good all the time with this team and whatever they do. No, but Trevor Williams' dad is cool. That's fine.
Trevor Williams' dad is cool. Check out our Away Games blend coffee. It tastes like shit.
It's absolutely awful. I'm hammering it right now. It's garbage. You only have it when you're hungover, and it makes you more hungover.
It's just Maxwell House, and we just write Away Games in Sharpie over the label.
Yeah, handwrite it right over. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Away Games Pod, if you don't mind. And also, if you don't mind, it would be lovely if you could give us a rating and a review. We would absolutely bloody love it. So thanks for listening, everybody, and we'll catch you next week.
See you next time.